Hello, good morning, and welcome in to 104.5 The Zone on a beautiful Friday morning. This is the Buck Reising Show to date without Buck Reising because he is off to Sin City, where he will hopefully come back without having lost his entire livelihood and in one piece. But that's okay, because for the next 3 hours, I'm Lucas Panzica, and I'm alongside Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio, whose dulcet tones you've already heard a few times at the top of this hour with the Titans Radio Report, with the show open. Rhett, good morning.
Good morning. How we doing?
We are fantastic. Jackson Williams, our producer, until 1 o'clock. Hang out with us. 615-737-1045, 1045 The Zone TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. Much to discuss. And Rhett, this is the time where Titans players, especially the veterans, can kind of unplug a little bit, or they should, right? They should take some time, allow themselves that space to be able to get back and mentally, physically prepare for training camp. That is not the case for you when it comes to Titans Radio. Is this the busiest time of your offseason? The least busy time of player and coaches offseason in the NFL? For you, is it the busiest?
It's right up there because it's a window of time where I know I can get things done. And knowing that there is no OTA to go to, no mini camp, no anything like that, and knowing that when training camp starts, it's full tilt boogie till whenever it's over is over, right? So, I just finished writing all of my imaging for the Titans season, basically, and sent that to my voice guy yesterday. And I'm working with some of our fine Titans radio stations along the network that need renewals. I handle contracts for those things, and then working on creative ideas for what it's going to sound like this fall. In fact, it's going to sound a little different. I'll give a tip here that I've used the same network theme for about 9 years. There's going to be a different network theme, and I'm trying to keep your scoreboard theme. Because I do like that because it's kind of an old school standalone. But just things like that, and also preparing for milestones because one of which we will reveal later on. There's a tease for you. But one I can talk – I talked a little bit about it yesterday on Blaine and Mickey, is this is the upcoming season. It's the 25th season of Titans football, which is really hard to believe when you think about it. But it's been that long. And so we'll take some opportunities to, put some features together, talk to some former players, and, put a different perspective on it because, it's a big deal. And it hadn't been that long ago in my mind that the Tennessee Oilers were a thing. And by the way, it's funny how things are cyclical and in popularity because those old Houston Oilers throwbacks, we know they're coming soon. And in fact, I think we'll hear something in the next couple of weeks about that. And I have an idea about which version it's going to be. Now, I was told that a while back, but you couldn't give that stuff away in 1997 and 98 when they were the Tennessee Oilers. They didn't, who's a Tennessee oil? There ain't no oil in Tennessee. And it's like, well, actually, there's a few oil wells, but it's not like Texas or, somewhere like that. And that got into the whole thing about Mr. Adams, being able to keep the name, likeness, image, and things of all of his beloved Oilers from then as a part of the move, but change the name, likeness, and image to the Titans, which it became. And then everything just went crazy because they had played in 4 different stadiums in 4 consecutive seasons. In 96, they played in the Astrodome their last year. They played at the Liberty Bowl in 97. They played at Vanderbilt in 98. And then what is now Nissan Stadium opened in 99. And that was when the new unis dropped, the new logos, all of that stuff. And they had all these core players in place that they had drafted, like Steve McNair, Eddie George. They picked up Frank Wycheck off of the waiver wire from Washington for $100, and we know how that worked out. And then they drafted the freak Javon Curse at 16, and that was really lightning in a bottle. But, Marcus Robertson and Blaine Bishop and all these guys were all there, and Bruce Matthews. And so it just became an electric thing. And it's been that long ago. And we visited yesterday on Blaine and Mickey about they were watching the Titans and Bengals, the very first game at then Adelphia Coliseum in September the 12th of 99, the very first one. And there's been hundreds of them since. And, 25 seasons it's special. And there have been some very high points. There's been some low points. And there's been some pretty good points in the last half dozen seasons with Mike Vrabel at the helm. So here we go.
Do you have a preference? Because we don't know what game they're going to wear the Oilers uniforms for.
Oh, God. Yeah, this is easy for me.
It's Houston, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was praying for a Houston primetime game to roll it out in their backyard. I'd love that. I'm here for that kind of violence all day long because, listen, anybody is like, well, Houston Texans should have that. It's like, guess what? They don't, and they're not gonna. So get over it, just like a fence, as my granddad would say.
even when he's in Vegas, his presence is still felt.
There it is. There it is.
So Titans play Houston at home. Or both matchups are in December. Play them at home December 17th, and then in Houston on New Year's Eve. So both of those are noon kickoffs. You don't think that would?
And you just wonder if that doesn't become a thing, because I would think they would want to roll those out before then.
Right.
You're talking about the last month of the season, basically.
Right. So last night, NBA draft took place in New York. A heavy local impact this year, and not because ex-Tennessee player was taken in the 20s like last year with Kennedy Chandler dropping to the second round of the Memphis Grizzlies. No, this year it was very hyper-localized right here in Nashville with two players out of Music City, former Cane Ridge star, and out of Alabama, Brandon Miller, number 2 overall to the Charlotte Hornets. And congratulations to Belmont guard Ben Shepherd, taking 26 to the Indiana Pacers. It was a wide range, Rhett, of where Ben might go. I mean, I saw it projected from anywhere between 14 and 40 when it came to Ben Shepherd, and he kind of found that sweet spot right in the middle, got in the first round, number 26 overall.
And great for him, because here's the thing about Ben Shepherd. It was reported he'd had, half dozen or more pre-draft workouts with multiple teams. And something I read last night after he was drafted that I found interesting, and I'd forgotten that Belmont had left, Conference USA or whatever it was, and moved to the Missouri Valley Conference with a little tougher competition.
Oh, yeah.
He was all offense and all defense conference in both of those. He's just the third player in Belmont history to be drafted. He had 18.8 average and 5.2 rebounds per game last year. I mean, the guy can play. And he just goes basically right up the road to Indianapolis to play for the Pacers in this, barring some kind of trade, because that's always the crazy part of this. But, that's a great story. And Brandon Miller, obviously, Ron Slay's been telling us about him for years at Cane Ridge High School. And I thought it was interesting that ABC/ESPN brought up the stuff that happened, earlier this spring.
In Alabama, the Darius Miles.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I've always been fascinated by the NBA draft, just because of the trade possibilities. I mean, it's the only thing where you can see a guy wear 3 or 4 different hats in one night. I mean, it's happened. People forget that Kobe Bryant had a Charlotte Hornets hat on before he had, So, and then seeing, and we've pretty much known for months that Victor Wembanyama from France was going to be the guy. And then you see he's 7'5", and he has an 8-foot wingspan. He's rail thin to me at 227 pounds. He needs to put some playing strength on. But, I mean, I understand why they saw what they saw. And then, Brandon Miller, and you thought Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson would probably be somewhere in that order, and that's exactly how they went. And then to see the Thompson twins, Amin and Azar Thompson, get taken back-to-back, that was pretty special, pretty cool. And, it's always interesting to me to see all these European players come in to the league, and it's been that way for decades. But you brought up to me before we got on the air of a list of guys who weren't drafted and the undervalue of big men, and I think it's because people are wanting to find the next Victor Wembanyama who can hit it from outside, but yet he's a legit 7-footer. And I've been watching NBA for a long time. I feel like in the early 90s, when European players first started to come over and also be drafted, when the Portland Trailblazers picked up Arvydas Sabonis, a legit 7-footer who could hit it from outside, I think that kind of changed a lot. And I think people have been looking for that. But yeah, it's amazing how, unless you're Shaq or somebody like that, sometimes you get left. And there's some big men who weren't taken last night.
Oscar Tshiebwe has been one of the most dominant players in college basketball for the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And National Player of the Year in 2022.
And at a major Power 5 program. And yeah.
Undrafted last night at Adama Sanogo, who played a massive role in UConn's national title run this past year. A run that got Dan Hurley a massive new deal. Undrafted. Drew Timme, first-team All-American year in and year out for Gonzaga. Undrafted.
Yeah.
I mean, 15, 20 years ago, that's not the case.
They would
for
have
these
been,
guys.
15, 20 years ago, you would have just named probably 3 lottery picks.
Yeah.
And that's just got how the game has changed in that respect.
College World Series finals are set. It's an all-SEC matchup, LSU versus Florida. LSU walking it off in the 11th, 1-0 real pitchers duel against Wake Forest last night. The number 1 overall seed curse continues in college baseball. It's been since the late 90s that the number 1 overall seed in the country does not, or that is the last time, I should say, the number 1 overall seed won the College World Series. LSU and Florida, a rematch from 2017 when the two went head-to-head, and LSU lost in 2 games. That's the last time LSU made it to the College World Series finals. So that will start tomorrow between LSU and Florida, ensures a 4th straight SEC national champion. But when we come back, things are quiet on the DeAndre Hopkins front, as expected. But let's talk about the hypothetical of DeAndre Hopkins in Nashville, and not just what that would mean for the Titans offense, but let's get specific. Which individual player on the Titans offense could benefit the most from adding DeAndre Hopkins? It's the Buck Reising Show with Lucas Panzica and Rhett Bryan on 104.5 The Zone. After a couple weeks of reports, visits, noise around DeAndre Hopkins, the dust has settled, and it'll probably remain that way for quite a while. So we sit here and we talk about hypotheticals. Right now, there seem to be two teams in the running, given that those are the two teams Hopkins visited, the Tennessee Titans and the New England Patriots. So if DeAndre Hopkins were to come to Tennessee, which individual player on the Titans roster would stand to benefit the most? Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica, hanging out with Rhett Bryan until 1 o'clock today of Titans Radio. So where do you stand on this, Rhett? I guess we're going to stick with the offense here. That seems to be the obvious place to look on individual players that could benefit the most from Nuke coming to Nashville.
Sure. So obviously you point to, a Treylon Burks first because he's going to be wide receiver number one. That's what he was drafted for, and I think that's one of the most interesting stories heading into this season is what does he do in year two, because it is well noted about the asthma, the weight, all of those things. And then you heard him tell us earlier this offseason that back around the middle of the last season in his rookie year, he started asking, how do I be a pro? What do I eat? How do I train? What do I do? Because quite frankly, I don't think that was much of a thing at Arkansas. And we've started to see that in practices, that OTAs and those things. He looks different. You can tell he's worked on his body. And so what you'd hope is that it's what we had hoped for A.J. Brown when Julio Jones came in 2 years ago, is that if you have DeAndre Hopkins, he's not going to take the top off of the defense, but my Lord, with the wingspan and the catch radius he has, and just, as Coach Mack would say, bear trap mitts to catch a football, he's going to take some of the heat off of Treylon Burks and going to free up Treylon for some things. Now, when I look at the year that A.J. Brown had in 21, he was already well on his way at that point, because Julio Jones obviously didn't play very much. And, he had, four 100-yard games. He had missed a couple of games with something there in weeks 3 and 4 that year.
You're talking about Julio?
Yeah, I'm talking about A.J. Brown, the effect of having Julio on the roster, But A.J. was already kind of well into it.
It's hard, and we just don't have the data, right, on how Julio actually impacted A.J. Brown, because I cannot remember what the snap count was of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Derrick Henry all on the field together. Yeah. It's really low.
It was really low, absolutely. But perhaps the answer to your question may be the not obvious and not Treylon Burks. You hope it's Treylon Burks, but I honestly think it could be Chig Okonkwo is the one who can benefit from this the most. I think Chig is going to be relied upon heavily and going to be a big part of this in year two. Not maybe more so in snap counts or attempts or targets than Treylon, but we've seen what the young man can do. And I'm looking back at his rookie stats. He had one catch for 11 yards in week 1. He didn't have anything the next 2 weeks. In week 4, he had 3 for 38 against the Colts. He had no catches, no targets against the Washington Commanders and the Colts again. And then on the end about week 9, he has, a catch here for 40 yards and a catch there for 40 yards. And so, he's never had a 100-yard game. He's never, he ended up having, I think, 450 on, 32 for 450, 14.1 a catch and 3 scores. But out of those catches, the explosion is there because he had 7 of his 32 catches were explosive plays of 20 yards or more, and 3 of the 32 catches were 40-plus. And so I can't help but think that that's a guy that's going to make a real step forward in year 2. And I honestly think that maybe be with or without DeAndre Hopkins. I think DeAndre Hopkins can only help that, because you think about this. You got Derrick Henry, Treylon Burks, DeAndre Hopkins, Chig Okonkwo out there. Like the sound of that. And look, as to when he signs and all those kinds of things, it's going to be a while, to your point. I don't think that's I'm not even sure it's a July thing.
Oh, to me, there's no reason for it to happen before training camp. If you're DeAndre.
Yeah.
Right?
And so with that, we're talking late July. We're talking over a month from now. Because he has no incentive to do so. And then the other part of it is if, let's say it's just those two teams, and I don't know, we're going to dig into this later in the show, but what would be the advantages to go into New England? Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi? Or Tannehill, who looks like he is nowhere near ready to give up that starting job? Now, the greater question remains is, where does the money come from? You know, if you look at Spot Track or whoever, it's around $8 million under the cap. They have not signed Will Levis yet, and they need money to operate on through the season. So it's going to have to come from somewhere. And even Rand Carthon has said publicly, you know, we have some things we can do wiggle room-wise to make room. But some room's going to have to be made because, you know, we don't know what D-Hop's going to get, but you figure it's going to be in the 8 to 10 million range just for this year, I would think.
I like what you're saying because of the chance for Chig to hit the ground running in 2023 as opposed to his rookie year where obviously there's an acclamation for him, for Traylon Burks. I mean, Chig Okonkwo didn't have 50 or more receiving yards in a game until December last season. The targets kind of spiked around that mid to late season mark, but for him to be able to hit the ground running in that aspect, not just week one in New Orleans, but training camp. And Chig talked about this a little bit over the course of the offseason program. Here's Chig Okonkwo talking about what he learned about himself during his rookie season. He didn't have that from the jump as a rookie.
And let's take into consideration another thing, because you talked about his numbers towards the middle and down the stretch of the season. This is with an injured Ryan Tannehill, and in a couple of cases, Malik Willis and Josh Dobbs throwing the ball to him. So that's another thing where I'm like, you know what? That really makes me think about how much he'll be involved and how good he'll be with a healthy Ryan Tannehill throwing to him. But yeah, Chig is he didn't carry himself like a rookie last year to me. Didn't speak like one, didn't act like one, didn't play like one for the most part. And I think he's very grounded and certainly knows what he wants, and I think it's certainly headed in the right direction.
615-737-1045 to join the discussion. Which Titans player stands to benefit the most from a potential DeAndre Hopkins signing? We'll go to Chuck in Clarksville up first. What's up, Chuck?
Hey, Lucas. Hey, first and foremost, I think Tim Kelly benefits the most. But if you're going with a player, it definitely, to me, would have to be Chig, because he can learn that he's got a pretty wide catch radius, too. He could learn a lot of things on how to body up to receivers the way DeAndre Hopkins does. And I think he could learn a lot there. And I'm going to tell you a player out of the weeds a little bit, but I think Reising McMath could benefit from it too, because he has he could benefit from his skill set too. So that's my guys.
Thanks for the call, Chuck.
And so Tim Kelly is what he says. And obviously I think that's someone who could benefit because everyone was ready to run Todd Downing out on a rail and welcome him in, and all that didn't end very well. But yeah, I mean, look, if we're going that route with Chuck's thought, I mean, the Titans as a whole could benefit. I mean, that's another weapon that could keep the chains moving on offense, and a defense that returns a good chunk of starters gets a rest and comes out and is more ferocious,
There's no question that would make Tim Kelly's life just a bit easier with more weapons on the table. Mark is in Nashville with the Titans player that could benefit the most from DeAndre Hopkins. What's up, Mark?
Not much. Thanks for taking my call. I'm actually going to say a group. I'm going to say the offensive line. Hopkins can slide into the slot, and he can be a great wide receiver for hot routes. And with him being veteran, he knows how to find the soft spots in the zone, and he's a really, really good possession wide receiver. So I'm going to say it's going to take some pressure off the O-line.
Thanks for the call, Mark.
I don't disagree with Mark. I mean, I think that is someone who could, or a group of guys who can benefit. And look, that offensive line is going to benefit by all the guys I mentioned. I mean, Derrick Henry, listen, Tajay Spears, Hassan Haskins, Chigakonkwo, Treylon Burks. I mean, you just start running through the list of, the main thing for me is trying to keep the injury bug at bay. They do that and have these pieces in place. I think that helps the offensive line and helps all of them as a whole anyway.
Yeah, that's an underlying piece of all of this, right? But in turn, if you're talking about the offensive line, you're talking about Derrick Henry, right? I mean, I saw Warren Sharp tweeting out, he had a Twitter thread on some issues with the Titans offense in 2022. SharpFootballAnalysis.com does some work for Fox. He said on first downs, Tennessee had the second highest run rate, despite defenses stacking the box at the fourth highest rate on those plays. So Derrick Henry is as much a part of this discussion as any wide receiver or pass catcher or even quarterback. We haven't even mentioned Ryan Tannehill in this.
Sure. And Warren Sharp's a good follow. I remember reading that. He also was the one that had that stat about how many fourth quarter points the Titans did not score and how many they actually did. That's another big thing in this is I think he is also maybe the one that put out if you'd ended the games at halftime, the Titans would have been 11-4 in a lot of those games.
Right. Yeah.
And I forget the number they scored in the fourth quarter, but that's obviously a place of emphasis I'm sure they would work on in finishing the game strong. And some of that is due to injury because you have reserves and guys you're pulling in off the street that maybe they're out of gas at that point, or maybe it just, difference in depth with your opponent.
So you said off the top, Treylon Burks being a wide receiver one, even with DeAndre Hopkins on this roster. So would that still be the expectation for you? That Burks is your wide receiver one, that's the expectation for the second-year player, no matter who else is on the roster?
I would think so. I mean, you dealt A.J. Brown and you drafted him on night one of last year's draft. So, yeah, I would think so.
Think about the impact of having a DeAndre Hopkins around for Treylon Burks just to help teach him how to be a wide receiver one.
That's right.
Right? I mean, I feel like that is
part of that how to be a pro thing, right?
Treylon Burks was asked about the thought of DeAndre Hopkins. The Titans were taken to the podium. This was, I want to say, mandatory minicamp. The news broke that DeAndre would be coming here for a visit maybe an hour before Treylon Burks, Mike Vrabel took to the podium. So naturally, Burks was asked about what he thought about the idea of DeAndre Hopkins coming to Nashville.
That's something that I can't control. He's an awesome player, great player. Would be fun to play with him. So, if we end up getting him, then we get him. If we don't, then we don't. But no offense to him, he's a great player. But I'm just glad. I like playing with who we have here. So
somebody you could learn a lot from, though.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he would be a great mentor. I've watched D-Hop since I was younger. One of my favorite players, and he just carries himself the right way, and then his game on the field just speaks for itself. So,
some people I saw take that as a slight to D-Hop, talking about no offense to him. I like who he got in the room. I didn't take it as that at all. I just thought he was talking about who they had in the room, and then followed it up about what kind of a mentor he could be.
Well, first of all, that's a veteran answer to a question. I didn't take that out of context at all. I mean, he said the right things. He gave no disrespect to D-Hop and also gave credence to the wide receiver room with who his current teammates are. That's a veteran answer.
We put it to a poll at Lucas Panzica on Twitter. Which Titans player stands to benefit the most from a potential DeAndre Hopkins signing? Burks, the leader right now, about 47%. Then it's Ryan Tannehill. I put out Burks, Tannehill, Chigakonkwo, and Derrick Henry as the options. So Ryan Tannehill at a 38% clip. I mean, you think back to Tannehill's first media appearance after the draft, where he kind of said, I thought they might add more in the receiver room, but they didn't. Not my job, et cetera, et cetera. You wonder what is going through Ryan Tannehill's mind right about now in regards to everything happening with DeAndre Hopkins and just the potential of him coming here. Because I feel like that's a really big gap, Rhett, of the Titans with what they have now and what they can potentially have with DeAndre Hopkins. From Ryan Tannehill's perspective, feels like there's a lot of ground between those two possibilities. So I'm sure he's waiting with bated breath over the course of the next few weeks on what's going to happen with this.
One quarterback wouldn't want a receiver like that, to your point. But I also think that Ryan Tannehill's a smart guy. And that's the thing I think that's getting overlooked in all of these conversations that you've had here on Buck's show and throughout the day parts here on the Zone, is that we're focused so much on the position group of wide receiver that it's like, listen, we don't fully know what Tim Kelly's offense is going to be, but if it's anything like what we saw in his time in Houston, there are receiving options. They just may not be a wide receiver. And that's why I'm saying you still have Treylon Burks, you still have Chika Okonkwo, you still have Nick Westbrook-Akine, and I don't know why people hate on him because he can make some plays. You drafted Tajay Spears, who can catch it out of the backfield. Hassan Haskins could do the same thing. We've seen Derrick Henry do it. He worked hard on it every offseason to get better at it. There are options there. And I haven't even talked about Josh Wiley, the tight end they took in, round 5 from Cincinnati, who can line up as an H-back and also catch it. I mean, he did that stuff at Cincinnati, who's a big target. There are options there. Would you love to have DeAndre Hopkins? Of course. Who wouldn't? But it's more than just the position group itself in terms of receiving threats and targets.
615-737-1045. We go to Drew, who is in Nashville up next. What's up, Drew?
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I was hearing you all guys making mention of Derrick Henry. This will be actually the first time in his career that it'll be freed up for having 8 and 9 men in the box with Diop. So Diop being out there, that's going to actually really open a lot of holes and plays for the big man. So thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for the call, Drew.
Drew has a valid point. I mean, you could point to Derrick Henry in this just for the mentions, the reasons he outlined right there. And I hope that's the case because, man, you turn 22 loose when he's got a couple of less guys down in there staring him down. I mean, we know what that can happen. We know what happens there. Even when it's stacked, we know what happens.
I mean, can you make an argument that the ripple effect from the attention that DeAndre Hopkins would garner could have just as much of an impact as the potential production of DeAndre Hopkins?
Sure. I mean, it could add tread life to Derrick Henry, who's had quite a few. I mean, he had 390 touches last year. That's a lot, man. Most of them carries. That's a lot. And, I know you guys talked about this on Blaine and Mickey yesterday when Mike Keith came on. You think about this. I mean, Derrick's 1,665 away from 10,000 as a rusher. That's pretty wild when you think about it.
Yeah, he's because fast approaching that mark.
That first year and a half, he wasn't as big a factor. They had DeMarco Murray, and there were some low points in a season in 2018, and then, man, after about 6 weeks after that London game, when he had that Jacksonville game, that primetime game here, he ripped off a 99-yarder and 232 in 4 scores. We've never looked back.
James is in Cookville up next on 104.5 The Zone. What's up, James?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Hey, nice to hear y'all on there today. And I really think that what this is going to do is going to make the Titans have longer possessions, and it's really going to help our defense and our defensive backs. We're going to be on the field a little longer. We're going to have a longer possession time of possession. Therefore, they're not going to have to be on the field as much. And hey, they made a lot of mistakes last year, and by keeping them off the field, you're keeping the opposing team's offense off the field, and I think it's going to help our DBs a lot.
Good stuff, James. Thanks for the call.
James, I totally agree with that part because one of the most important stats in today's NFL football is points per possession. And if you can at least get somebody down there in field goal range, but obviously you want 6 and something extra. But, I think you give your defense a chance to get a breather and get back in there and get after it with their best reps, knowing they've had some breather spots and lulls in an actual game. I mean, how many times did we see the defense out there so long last season? And any long sustained drives like that, and especially ones you can cap off with some type of a scoring drive, it just makes the defense and Ryan Stonehouse's job as a punter and trying to flip the field even easier.
Switch gears a little bit when we come back. Some news we received yesterday in the SEC and what it could mean for the future of Tennessee football. The SEC stat of the day is next on 104.5 The Zone. LSU fans were blinded by the light of the NCAA yesterday. Just minding their business, walking around. Boom, 3 years probation, which really isn't much. 37 wins vacated. Who cares? Game still happened. Will Wade, 2-year show cause, still the head coach at McNeese State. He basically can't recruit for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Suspended the first 10 games of the season for
Couldn't
McNeese
happen
State.
to a nicer guy.
Right. You hate to see it. LSU fans don't care about that. They'll just keep plugging right along.
Yep.
So we do the SEC stat of the day, 10:45 each and every Friday. Welcome back, 104.5 The Zone. Lucas Panzica hanging out with Rhett Bryan of Titans Radio, Jackson Williams, our producer. Rhett, the SEC stat of the day is 37 wins because, as I said, that is the amount of wins vacated from the Les Miles era. It was not just basketball violations that got LSU pinged yesterday. It was NCAA penalties stemming from a scandal involving former offensive lineman, I hope I say it correctly, Vidal Alexander, who played for the Tigers from 2012 to 2015. Alexander was retroactively rendered ineligible because his father received over $180,000 from a booster who embezzled funds from a Baton Rouge children's hospital.
Wow.
It's quite a sentence. That's from The Athletic.
That sounds like some Brett Favre stuff going on. Go ahead.
So with that, Les Miles' overall record goes from 145 and 73, a winning percentage of 665, down to 108 and 73, a winning percentage of 597. That's very meaningful because Les Miles now does not meet the 60% mark that is required for the College Football Hall of Fame when it comes to winning percentage. He gets knocked under
How about that for a
line
parting gift?
of demarcation.
Wow.
So this came up a lot with the tragic passing of Les Miles. Les Miles, very much still alive. Mike Leach,
Yes.
former Mississippi State head coach.
Another colorful, witty man.
Yes, who
And a pretty damn good football coach, right?
who was just below that 60% mark. Mike Leach was. And there were a lot of cries, a lot of shouts to scrap that rule just for Mike Leach to make up that difference because of what he has meant to college football and put him in the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't know that there's going to be that much in favor of Les Miles in that regard. Miles has had some controversies, had to part ways with Kansas because of some alleged sexual misconduct from his time at LSU. So people aren't going to be banging that drum for Miles as hard as they were for Mike Leach, who has never had an instance like that. But in a sport like college football, when the margin is that thin, you're talking about a winning percentage of 597, not quite 600, but 597. Should what he was to college football as a character factor in at all when you're talking about the College Football Hall of Fame? The Mad Hatter, eating grass, all of those things.
Right. And I don't know exactly what all the qualifications are or, what the parameters are. I think the difference is Mike Leach may end up getting in because I think he was more likable, more amenable. I mean, when he passed, you saw all those stories flood your timeline of, hey, he spent time with me when he didn't have to, and I was just a little reporter from so-and-so. And maybe Les Miles did that, but he just didn't seem as amenable to me. He just seemed kooky, right?
Right.
But, man, vacating 37 wins to get him under the mark. Wow. I mean, you don't think about that until you put it out there just the way you did.
And I don't know that Les Miles is a surefire College Football Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Even if he's over that mark. He won the national title at LSU. He won at Oklahoma State. For me, and maybe that's just because that's kind of the era that I was really growing up in, was Les Miles, the head coach of LSU. So he was such a significant factor in my college football, adolescence, that maybe it means more to me than somebody else in the big picture. I don't know. But it is an interesting discussion because similar conversations were had about Mike Leach's winning percentage. But more importantly, what we saw the NCAA hand down to LSU, what might that mean for Tennessee? Who, obviously similar allegations from Jeremy Pruitt's time. A hearing happened in Cincinnati with the NCAA, with Tennessee, with Pruitt and his team just a couple of months ago. And we have no idea when a ruling could come down. It's the NCAA. It's a total wild card. It could be tomorrow. It could be in 5 years. Could we see something similar even though LSU did institute a self-imposed bowl ban in 2020 when it's a COVID season and they went, 3-7 under Ed Orgeron? Tennessee chose not to.
And that may be where the difference lies in what's ahead for whatever the punishment is for Tennessee. Look, this is not the answer you want, but I think it's just only time will tell as to how severe this is for Tennessee.
The thing is, if it's as severe as it was for LSU, Tennessee fans will take that in a heartbeat. If it's 3 years probation, a few wins vacated here or there, from the time of Jeremy Pruitt, right?
Which they'd probably like to forget.
You want to vacate wins from a 3-7 COVID year, you want to vacate wins from an 8-5 season when they won the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl? Mm-hmm. Okay, we can live with that.
Right. Yeah, it's not like it's we're not talking about the death penalty with SMU here.
So. Right. So,
did you ever see that 30 for 30, by the way?
Pony Excess?
Yeah, man.
One of the best.
That's crazy.
Actually, I would love to ask you, and I'll ask you this on the other side. We've got a discussion, too, about now that baseball is out of the running, the College World Series Finals is set. Crazy finish yesterday between LSU and Wake Forest. LSU will play Florida for the national championship in a series this weekend. But with baseball out of the running, we've had the discussion of which Tennessee sport is closest to winning a title. But in turn, also, which sport is it most difficult to make up that gap between the haves and have-nots, so to speak, in college athletics? We'll get into that, and I have a question for Rhett Bryan about the sports documentary that you want to see made that has never come out. A 30 for 30 about a sports story, scandal, whatever it might be, that you believe still needs to be made. Would love to get your perspective on that. And you, the audience, 615-737-1045. We'll be right back. Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you until 1 o'clock on 1045, The Zone. It is 10:59. Good morning from the Superbook.com sports desk. I'm Lucas Panzica. College World Series, the National Championship Series is set, and it is an all-SEC matchup. LSU walked it off in the 11th inning on Thursday, beating Wake Forest 1-0. They will face Florida in a 3-game series in Omaha. Game 1 starts tomorrow at 6 p.m. NBA draft, Victor Wembanyama taken first overall to the San Antonio Spurs as expected. Former Cane Ridge and Alabama star Brandon Miller, second overall to the Charlotte Hornets. And former Belmont guard Ben Shepherd, taken 26th overall by the Indiana Pacers. Saturday night, Nashville Soccer Club is on the road and heading to Columbus in an Eastern Conference matchup. You can hear the call on 104.5 The Zone. Kickoff at 6:30. Pregame coverage starting at 6. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back. Hour number 2 on 104.5 The Zone. I'm Lucas Panzica. I'm next to Rhett Bryan, executive producer of Titans Radio. Jackson Williams is making it all happen. And I want to hear from you, 615-737-1045, as we ask you, knowing that the National Championship Series is set in stone for this weekend, Florida and LSU beginning tomorrow, an all-SEC matchup in Omaha. So, with Tennessee baseball officially out of the running, previously we had posed this question: which Tennessee sport is the closest to that national championship? Baseball was the obvious answer. They were in essentially the final 6 of the sport. That's no longer the case. So, not only which Tennessee sport is closest to winning a title, Rhett, but a whole extra part of that is which sport is most difficult to win a national championship in. When there's a gap, which major sport between baseball, football, and basketball, and softball can be a part of that too, is it most difficult to make up that gap?
Well, I think the obvious answer for me is the football program, because you have limited amount of opportunities, limited amount of games, and even though you have a college football playoff, it's the powerhouses of the college world, and it's expanding. And not only that, but your conference is expanding next year to include Texas and Oklahoma. I just think that is so hard to do. Nick Saban is even having trouble doing that in this era now with college football playoffs. Think about that. I mean, it's been a minute since he's won one, right? A couple of years. So I would say that. Now, in terms of the first part of your question, which one of the Tennessee programs is maybe closer to winning one? Honestly, fresh off of the World Series exit of the Vols, I think the baseball part of it is the one that is maybe the closest, because what I see Tony Vitello doing and they're totally different coaches, but you think about what Tim Corbin has done with Vanderbilt. And as he started to rise to prominence and they were winning lots of games and eventually win a national championship, there's a pipeline of players that come there now. And there's a pipeline of players that leave there and go to the Major League Baseball. There's some on every team, it seems like. And I think he's starting to build that now that he's been there for a little bit. And I think that's, and it's still tough, but I think that's the one that's probably the closest out of the ones you brought up.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you on that. Because that's the only one where the gap's already been made up. The gap's made up.
Yeah.
Tennessee's been right there multiple times now in the Tony Vitello era.
Right.
Just a handful of games away, not a handful of recruiting classes or a roster building away or a pitching staff away. Tennessee had one of the best pitching staffs in the country this year. Mm-hmm. A handful of games away. Were they the best team in the country this season? No. Were they last season? Yes, for the entirety of the year. And then they fell in the Super Regionals to Notre Dame. The curse of the number 1 overall seed in college baseball.
Right.
But all that to say, the gap's made up. The recruiting is there. The pitching is there. The only thing that's left is obviously the toughest hump to get over, a championship.
Finish the deal.
Finishing the job. Exactly. That hasn't been done yet for Tony Vitello. But, yeah, I struggle to find an argument for any other head coach at Tennessee that you could tell me ex-head coach and ex-sport is closer to the pinnacle of their respective sport than Tony Vitello is with Tennessee baseball. Even with Tennessee softball, who just reached the Women's College World Series. I mean, Karen Weekly been doing that for so long. I mean, the Oklahoma dynasty right now, it seems impossible to unseat. They just won their third straight title. I don't know what they're doing over there with their softball program, but they're doing something right.
It's like Gino Auriemma and the Lady Huskies, right?
Right. So I guess then the question is between basketball and football, who would be closer? If we're on the same page here about baseball.
Between basketball and football?
Right. We'll stick with men's hoops, because in women's hoops, I think there's a large gap right now between, the Lady Vols reached the Sweet 16. Things were good, but there's a big difference between UConn and Tennessee right now in women's basketball.
Yeah, there is.
But when it comes to the men's side, they're going to have one of the most veteran teams in the country this year. They're going to be talented. Rick Barnes has been recruiting at the highest level Tennessee basketball has ever recruited in the modern age. Yet, it still feels like there are several steps to climb before Tennessee can be considered a national championship contender, simply to me because of Rick Barnes' tournament history.
I wouldn't disagree. That's exactly what I would have pointed to as you're kind of laying this out. He's clearly a good basketball coach and gets guys in the building. Kevin Durant is not walking through that door, right? And as competitive as that is, I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, maybe basketball is closer just because it's a little – I mean, both of them, it's so hard to win because, I mean, in the tournament, you lose and you're going home. You stay and you play if you're hitting W's in the column. So,
well, with football, I struggle because I feel like the gap between Tennessee and, the Georgias and Alabamas and Ohio State right now is a little bit bigger than Tennessee fans like to think it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, we have Joe Milton in a small sample size of a really nice performance in a bowl win, and we need to see more of that, do we not? I mean,
absolutely.
That's where we're at. Everybody jokes about him throwing it out of Neyland Stadium because he can rocket it that far. But, I mean, he, going into that game, I was like, that's what I want to see. And if he does well and is accurate and tempers the cannon a little bit, they can win, and they did. But you want to see a 12, 13 game, sample of that in 2023.
As excited as Tennessee fans are to watch Joe Milton and the offense this year, I still don't think that there's an expectation to contend for a national championship in 2023. I think that comes with Nico, in my opinion. 615-737-1045 to join the discussion. So when it comes to football, the 24/7 Sports Talent Composite, the inception of that came in 2015, essentially taking the talent profile of every single team based on recruiting rankings, based on transfer portal rankings, and it's as accurate of a tool as we have to measure the talent across the board, team by team, in the country. So since 2015, Clemson is the national champion with the lowest talent composite on their entire roster, ranking at number 9. They, according to this metric, were the number 9 most talented team in the country, and that with that Trevor Lawrence team. Clemson won another national championship where they were the number 6 team in the talent composite. Now, every time Alabama or Georgia has won the national championship in this recent run, they've been the number 1 and at worst number 2 team in that composite, because getting out of the SEC is obviously a different animal than getting out of the ACC. And like you mentioned, that becomes more difficult after 2023 when divisions go away. And you no longer have to make sure that you beat, where Georgia's no longer the one big hump to get over, right?
And Texas and Oklahoma are coming in, and you can say what you want about both those programs, but they play football now, and Texas is kind of odd as much as they've got on the plate and in terms of talent and being able to make that into have that come out in wins and losses, but it still toughens up. Yeah, it's amazing what's about to happen to the SEC.
Tyler on the F&M Bank chat says, Heupel just needs another year or two to start to actually build depth on the roster. One of the things Bama and Georgia has over us, even their backups, are starter level. Problem with that is, and Tennessee's been recruiting well. I mean, Tennessee has had especially a nice week just in the last 5-6 days. 3 to 4 high-profile 4-star prospects that have committed to Tennessee on both sides of the ball. Tennessee has worked its way into the top 10 in recruiting rankings at this point under Josh Heupel. There's still a major difference between that and finishing at the top of those lists, and even in the top 3 or 4 of those lists.
Yeah, because of the other two that was mentioned by Tyler in the FNM Bank chat. Georgia and Alabama are getting 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, deep. Log jams of them. And I'm not putting too much value into how many stars ranking you are, because we've seen low stars become superstars and the other way around. But you're constantly getting the best of the best coming in there in the pipeline.
I wanted to ask you this before we hit the break, because we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago talking about Tennessee football. My answer was related to Tennessee football with the question, what is a sports documentary that just hasn't been made yet that needs to happen? A 30 for 30 needs to bunker down and make one, or whoever, HBO, whatever. Mine was the Tennessee coaching search of 2017, specifically Shiano Sunday. The idea of an entire fan base basically undoing a coach with politicians involved, local businesses, fans storming, marching onto Neyland Stadium with picket signs and everything over a football coach. So what would your answer be?
All right, correct me if I'm wrong, but have they done a 30 for 30, or is anybody in a documentary about the Saints and Bountygate?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, they made a Kevin James movie, I believe. But I don't know if that if that's what you're looking for.
But I mean, that interests me. Anything with the Patriots cheating scandal and film and practice, I don't think they've done anything on that. Those, because most of the most infamous things or scandals or tragedies in sports, most of that stuff has been done. The death of Lynn Bias. We mentioned SMU getting the death penalty. And I think they've even done something recently on Tim Donaghy with the points deal, the NBA referee too, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I would stick with something like that, because I'm always interested in just something that goes haywire. I mean, you know me well enough. Counterculture things fascinate me. If a good documentary about a cult, I'm like, I got to see how do they get snared in? How does this work? Right. So, but yeah, I would go with a couple of those as examples.
I'm trying to find the source of this, but I'm seeing a documentary called The Darkest Scandal in NFL History, Paid to Kill, about Bountygate. And I can't tell if this is an NFL Films production. I don't think it is. This seems to be something almost homemade on like YouTube. So yes, that is the extent of it. That's fantastic. I completely agree. We need more than a Netflix movie starring Kevin James to profile the scandal that was Bountygate with the New Orleans Saints and Sean Payton.
All right, I'm going to give you one other one here. My neighbor, Eric, has texted me, and he said a 30 for 30 about Jerry Anderson would be great. And he said he drowned, saving some kids that I knew from drowning in the Stones River in Murfreesboro in 1989. He said Rescue 911 came to Murfreesboro and made an episode about him. He played for the Steelers, played at Oklahoma, and he had actually saved other people from drowning when he played at Oklahoma when there were floods there. And I've always heard that story about him, but there are some heroic things that come to light in tragedy around a sports person, and that is one. Eric's right. I had forgotten about him because I think he saved 2 or 3 kids from drowning in Stones River back then.
Well, it's hard to follow that up. I did have a friend text me, said, "Where in the bleep is my Cubs World Series 30 for 30 on the 108 years with the curse?"
I mean, I think that's appropriate.
I'm actually surprised that has not been
as long
made.
as it took for them to get another one. I think that's a no-brainer.
And the long build-up.
I mean, they did one on Eric Bartman or whatever his name is that caught the fly ball.
That's right. That's
I mean,
right.
if you could do that, then do one when you actually win one. Why not?
That's a great point. They have literally done documentaries on the Cubs not winning the World Series. So do one on breaking an over 100-year streak. They did one for the Red Sox in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
That was an extraordinary circumstance coming back down from 3-0 against the Yankees.
But just the fact that it had been over 100 years, why not? I mean, yeah.
That's a great one. That is a great submission. Give us yours, 615-737-1045. Maybe we'll ask Coach Mack this question. When we come back, Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio joins us on 1045 The Zone.
Erectile dysfunction is something that a lot of guys deal with as they age. It's natural. Your body changes. You want to make sure that you have a support system in place as those things happen and if those things happen to you. The Tennessee Men's Clinic has successfully treated thousands of men in this area, and they have a successful and proven treatment plan and experienced staff who will work with you to find the treatment path that makes the most sense for you to get you performing like you haven't in years. No one size fits all, and the Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to work through that process with you. There can be a lot of frustration, a lot of skepticism, a lot of negativity around getting the help that you need, and everyone will have a different medical plan for ED. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is going to help you when you go in to either their Cool Springs or downtown offices with your initial appointment that will include blood work and a medical consult. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to help, so don't be like most men and wait a year or longer. Call today, 615-208-9090. That's 615-208-9090, or visit them today at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com.
That music can only mean one thing. Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio, each and every Friday, same time, same place on 104.5 The Zone. Lucas Panzica, Rhett, Bryan, with you. Jackson Williams, our producer. Coach, when I hear this music, or when I see you walk into a room now, I feel like this music should be playing. Wherever we are, doesn't matter the building. Go ahead.
Lucas, that's very kind of you, but I'm just very proud to be able to be on with you and Rhett today and to talk to all of our listeners. This is a time of year when there's some stuff to talk about. Some of it is not football, but that's okay. I watched every bit of that World Series, College World Series game last night. I'm going to make it to Omaha sometime. I want to go out there. I mean, I'd love to go out there when the Frogs are involved, but Tennessee's involved. That looks like a really, really good environment.
Was that your kind of game, Coach? A pitching duel where it's scoreless until the 11th inning and someone walks it off with the solo shot, or do you like the small ball? Do you like explosive game with a lot of runs? Like what's Coach Mac's kind of baseball game?
I just like a close game. I just like a close game. And that one clearly was a close game because nobody could get on, and then to have a walk-off. And when he hit that thing, he knew it was gone. I knew it was gone. You knew it was gone. Rhett knew it was gone. Everybody knew it was gone in that stadium. Yeah, I just want a close game. Some of these games have been fascinating. They really have been to watch. That tournament in itself is really quite an event. That I need to go. I've never been. I want to go.
So, Mac, you're currently on the Mac Over America tour. Are you still in West Texas?
I'm on the Mac Over America tour. I've been in West Texas. Guys, when I landed in Lubbock, Texas on Monday, it was 108. A nice breezy 108.
So balmy and delicious. Yes.
Oh, it's balmy and delicious. It's been incredible. But also on the Mac Over America tour is a stop in Phoenix, a stop in L.A. I will be back. I will probably be back early tomorrow morning because I'm involved with that Heimerdinger Foundation dinner that's tomorrow night in Franklin. Out at the hall out there at the factory. So I am going to be back for that. But it's been a nice visit. Got a really great visit with my family there in West Texas, and it was really good. Had a straight line winds and a tornado come through. So
lovely.
That's summer in West Texas. So everything's good. Everything is good. But yes, I'm getting ready to end the tour, and we'll be back in Vegas early Saturday morning.
So, Mac, we've had discussions prior to you coming on about, of course, we're discussing the possibility of DeAndre Hopkins and who could, benefit from that. And there's multiple answers. Callers have had multiple answers. Somebody said Tim Kelly at offensive coordinator. Somebody said Ryan Tannehill. Somebody said Derrick Henry. All of that aside, because we don't know when and where he's going to sign. But it got me to thinking about players that are going into year two and into this Tim Kelly offense. Based on what you and I have seen at OTAs and minicamp, without giving away inside baseball secrets, what are your impressions of what we have seen so far in a micro sample of Chig Okonkwo and then Treylon Burks? Because I feel like those guys, are going to be more involved in this thing for sure, and they look like they're ready to do the part.
You know what, Ray? You're right. I mean, you and I watch practice together all the time, and so, we have these discussions, but without being biased, which, of course, we're on the Titans broadcast, and we want the Titans to do everything. We want them to do really, really well for a lot of reasons. But just watching and just, in the eyes that you look at when you're evaluating players, just like we do for the draft, you can see the difference in those two players immediately, especially from their rookie years. Now, Chig Okonkwo was able to develop during the season because he stayed healthy. And you could see progressive steps that he took during the season. Treylon Burks, started out behind a lot of things. Conditioning was one of them. But when he started getting his groove back a little bit, you could still see what he could be. Then he gets a turf toe, and then, of course, he gets his face broke, on that combat catch in the end zone. And so, then with the concussion. But both of those players now look like Treylon looks like a completely different player to me. I'd be interested to hear what your, take on that is. But he looks like, because he's confident. And I talked with Rob Moore. Rob Moore, told me the same thing. But Chig Okonkwo, to me, started to develop at the end of last year, even as much struggles as the offense was having, he started to develop some real confidence in himself being able to perform in the National Football League. So I think you've pegged two players that I think will benefit greatly, from the adjustment of an offense and also just being in their second year. So I think you've hit both of those guys on the head. I think they're both at different stages of their development just because of what transpired during their rookie seasons. But I like what I've seen from both of those guys, Rhett.
So, in my opinion, on Traylon, I mean, you outlined it well right there of, some peaks and valleys he had. And yeah, people forget about the broke his face, in the end zone, all that stuff. The thing with Chig, to me, is the back half of the season. First of all, he never really carried himself like a rookie. He made some mistakes like a rookie, but he has always been a grounded and intense kind of guy, kind of laser focused in. And you're right. I think because of that and having those valuable reps down the back half of the season, I think he is a little further ahead than Traylon. And then Lucas and I were also talking about Chig and some of the numbers he started to grab towards the end of the year in targets and catches. Not all those were from Ryan Tannehill. Some of that was Malik Willis. Some of it was Joshua Dobbs. And so I think there's even more promise there because he's going to have a healthy number 17 thrown to him in this. And I think Traylon benefits from a healthy Ryan Tannehill as well.
Yeah, you're right. And Ryan Tannehill, look, the value of Ryan Tannehill of this football team, and if people have not been watching with both eyes open, if they don't understand what that's been since he was inserted in the third quarter there at Denver, because you could just see it. And one of the greatest examples of it is with the unprecedented amount of injuries that the Titans have had for 2 years, 91 and 86, but they were able to withstand the 91, still win 12 games because your quarterback stayed healthy.
And your D-line.
Stayed healthy, and your D-front stayed healthy.
Yep.
Last year, when the quarterback got hurt and the D-line started getting decimated because the offensive line was already having real issues, those three things happening all at once, it was you were very, very much restricted. You had problems going into games, being able to manufacture. The fact that they were able to stay as close as they were able to stay and still play for a division championship for the last game of the season was amazing to me. And so what we have done, and you've seen it, the offensive line has been, we will see what the retooling of this offensive line has come to. Just watching without pads on, which there's no ability to be able to discern what an offensive line is until the pads are on. But they look like an athletic group, and they look like a group. I was on earlier this week, and Blaine was asking me about the chemistry of them, and I think that they started to develop a chemistry as people in the locker room and knowing one another, but that chemistry of working together can only come with time on task. So we're waiting to see that. But Chig Okonkwo, and as I said earlier, he never let the problems that the offense was having last year, regardless of who the quarterback was, bother his progression. He never did. The other thing he started doing, Rhett, that I really liked, he started being very, very aggressive once he caught the football. Wasn't just catching the football. He was very aggressive afterwards. He made some really, really nice plays after the catch last year that I think we can look forward to some more of that this year.
Mac, to your point, then I'll let you take off here, Lucas. You're right, because looking at his stats again from last season, he had 32 catches for 450 and 3 scores. 7 of those 32 catches were X plays of 20-plus yards. 3 of them were what I would call a super X play of 40-plus yards. So to your point, the explosion and being aggressive and really fighting for the blades of grass after the catch is totally there in your point.
Well, again, that's why I like doing ball with you, Ray. You got the numbers, and you're exactly right. But see, you could see that. You could see that, you could feel that, and by looking at that and just watching him, you could feel his confidence growing. And so I think that's the type of player that we will start to see. That he will just build on that once training camp starts.
Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio with us on 104.5 The Zone. But building off of that, Coach, obviously new play caller in place, right, with Tim Kelly. From what players have talked to us about, new system in place. There are a lot of differences that Chig Okonkwo himself has talked about. So what's the challenge been like, you think, for Chig this offseason coming into his second year, obviously much more prepared for this level than he was a year ago at this point, but now having to add that part of it in adjusting to new terminology and a new offense under Tim Kelly.
Yeah, they're all learning, and this offense will be different, but the terminology part of it, Lucas, and I'm glad you bring that up. Everything that they've talked about, the thing they've talked about publicly is the nomenclature's been cut down. As far as the terminology, that's been cut down. And so to me, and we can only say so much because they allow me to watch practice every day. And so the only thing that what that points to though is it's definitely going to, when Mike Vrabel was talking last year, needing to play faster. I think, some people thought he was talking about just getting guys that could run in a straight line faster on this roster. That's not what he was talking about. He was talking about being able to execute what was going on at a quicker pace. And I think some of that will come with, just cutting down on the verbiage that they've done. You can see that in practice. I mean, they are running when they run practice. And again, this is not talking out of turn. They run back-to-back drills that are mirrored, with offense, defense, so that they have doubled the reps that people are able to get in doing this. And you can see, you can watch one group and then you can watch the other group when you get back and up high and watch it to where I watch it from, that you can start to see things starting to come together, but it's a quicker pace. Now, the things that they're going to do personnel-wise, those types of things, we will all see it as it transpires during the preseason, and then we'll be able to talk about it some. But having watched it during the OTAs, you can tell it's going to be a different offense.
Coach, we've talked a lot since the end of OTAs about this being the time of year for players, especially veterans, to be able to unplug, right, give themselves time to take that break and then come back and have that cushion to mentally, physically prepare for training camp. But what about the rookies right now, the guys that spent so much of the offseason in that pre-draft process, taking visits, getting acclimated? What should this time of year look like for those guys?
Well, they're still working. They stayed 2 weeks after the OTAs were over. They were still there for 2 weeks. There's rookie orientation programs that the league mandates that you put them through. Plus, they were continuing to build on what they have learned and now how to build a base and a foundation physically for training camp. So they were there for 2 weeks. And so once they leave, they still, the main message that I always gave when I was a head coach, Mike Vrabel will say the same thing: do not lose the base of this condition that you have gotten. And however much you thought that these OTAs were different than the way you practiced at your various universities, wherever you came from, it's going to be even accelerated, because things accelerate once you get into training camp, and then they really start to ramp up once preseason games start, and then before you know it, we're going to be on a plane going to New Orleans. So don't lose the base that you have. And, they spent the last practice in OTAs, and I'm not talking out of turn here, and they extended their individual drills to do drills that players could do on their own that were position specific, that they need to continue to do until they show back up here on the 25th of July when they report.
Coach Dave McGinnis with us here on the Buck Reising program. Coach Mack, I want to flip to the defense and some of the new additions that we have seen this offseason, and one that I feel like, and we're going to talk about this later in the show, but one I don't think maybe is talked about enough is the addition of Arden Key, the pass rusher. We're talking about a young man that has 76 appearances in games he's played in. I think he has 13 starts, 14 career sacks, I think 18 tackles for loss. He's one that stood out to me in terms of his presence, a savvy veteran coming in who knows how to be a pro, but yet is maybe a little bit unproven and has something to show and prove. I wanted your impressions of Arden Key in this offseason process, because, Coach Vrabel moved the mandatory minicamp kind of inside and made a sandwich out of the OTAs, and yet he was still there as a first-year Titan in those OTAs, still putting in the work.
Yeah, you bring up two very relevant points. First of all, this is his chance now to be a dude. This is his chance to be a dude. And the fact that he did stay after the mandatory was over, just demonstrates, how much he wants to embrace this opportunity that he has. I've always been fascinated with him, ever since he was coming out of the draft out of LSU. He's a long guy. He never has been a real bulky guy, but he's got length, and he's a Gumby type of a dude, and he always played with a high energy. And you could see that high energy on the practice field. I mean, he's constantly going, both physically. He's talking all the time. I mean, but he looks like he really likes to play. Plus, this guy can play multiple spots. And so you're right. I mean, I think this is a really nice addition that will only aid us, on the front, whether they play 5 down, whether they play 3 down, whether they play 4 down, depending on what they do defensively by down and distance. This guy's the guy that can move around. Arden and Aziz, those 2 names to me are really nice additions, brand new to this football team, that are going to be contributors really, really early and consistently. And both of those guys came in with the same mindset. They had a taste of being the dude. Now they're getting an opportunity to be the dude. And this is the time in their careers when they need to hold on to that, jump on that, and run with it.
And I'm glad you mentioned linebacker Aziz Al-Shire, because, again, he's a guy that has had some experience but is somewhat unproven, has that chance, as you say, to be a dude. Both he and Arden Key were vocally, by body language, the whole thing, they immediately immersed themselves in as veteran pros that have come in here to be a Titan and to get a team over the hump.
Well, if you come into this organization and to the atmosphere and to that Mike Vrabel and his coaching staff has established here, if you're a ball player that loves ball, you can fit right in. You feel right at home really, really quick, and then you feel at home. You're able to express yourself, on the football field. This isn't a feel your way in place here, because you've got, Mike Vrabel makes it very, very, in no uncertain terms to players that he brings in here, and the type of players that, you need to love ball when you come in here, because we do. And that's what goes on here. And plus, then we're going to work on things that will help you be a better player. And both of those guys, Rhett, during the OTAs, the entire time, have embraced that. I mean, when you watch them in their individual drills, they have embraced the coaching that they're getting, but you are correct. And then they have both slotted themselves in and seem to feel very, very comfortable here in Nashville and at St. Thomas Sports Park. Really, really quickly.
Coach, one position battle that we haven't discussed a ton, because I don't know what there is to discuss based on what we see at practice, is the kicker battle between Trey Wolf, the undrafted free agent out of Texas Tech, and, of course, Caleb Shudak, the second-year pro. I mean, just going back to you when you were a head coach, Mac, or an assistant head coach, how would you typically handle the kicker position? Was that largely delegated? How much did you oversee it, especially when it was a critical position battle like the Titans have right now with 2 relatively unexperienced guys?
Lucas, I'm going to be very honest. I get a lot of comments around since I've been there doing it on the radio, talking with people, and people out telling me, Coach Mack, you've taught us so much football. We really love listening to you. You break it down where we can understand it, and I'm always honest. So let me be real honest. Here's what I knew about kickers. Get it between those 2 yellow things. That's what I knew about it. And that's just being very honest. I would hire really good special teams coaches. I'd hire good kicking coaches. And then, of course, I would – but to me, that is – they are so much like professional golfers. I mean, they revolve in a different planet than any other players in the league. Okay, so to me, I would, and again, look, I've been through some things with kickers. I had Bill Grammatica jump up and blow his ACL out after celebrating a field goal at New York Giants, and then had no kicker for the game. So, yeah, but as far as coaching the kickers, I know the support that they need. They have to have a good battery. I do know that, and we've got a Pro Bowl long snapper that I love. I mean, that dude is a dude. A snapper can be a dude in the league. Morgan Cox is a dude. All right, and then plus the battery I know is very important. But as far as me technically coaching a kicker, I would just look at him and say, yellow things, put it between them. When I call it, you kick it between them. But there is a battle going on between those 2, to get serious about it. There really is a battle going on between those 2. And they both had kicking opportunities during this OTA And you could see them. They both had their days, and then they had their days where, just like a professional golfer, they were off a little bit. This will be very interesting to watch. The thing that I do know that the Titans have, that they've had all the 15 or 16 years now that I've been involved with Titan football, the one thing they do have, they've got a legit punter.
That's right. That will never change. But get it between those two yellow things. We'll find out who can do that more for the Titans, I guess, throughout the course of training camp. Coach, appreciate you as always. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and the Mac Over America tour, and we'll talk soon.
Lucas, see you. Rhett, see you, man.
All right, Mac.
Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio with us on 104.5 The Zone. Let's talk about that coming up.
I'm glad you want to do that because I'm gonna give you the rundown and tail of the tape with Caleb Shudak and Trey Wolf, the undrafted from Texas Tech. And I now also have a potential free agent that I think they might be interested. I don't know that they're interested in signing, but he would be interesting to me. Let's tease it that way.
Next on 104.5 The Zone.
The Gambling Clinic is here to help you if you or somebody you love has been experiencing issues caused by sports gambling. Now, the vast majority of people gamble for fun without any problems, but about 5% of people report spending too much money on gambling, getting into arguments at home because of it, and the Gambling Clinic is here to help you if you are experiencing any of those situations. It was established in 1999 by Dr. James Whalen and his staff at the University of Memphis, and the goal is to complete 8 to 10 weekly individual sessions with someone trained to help with gambling problems and gambling addiction. They're not there to discourage you from gambling because, like I said, the vast majority of people gamble without problems. But if you are somebody who experiences issues, they want to give you the tools and help you gain capacity to be able to identify those problem areas for you if you are participating in gambling. For more information, go to thegamblingclinic.com. That's thegamblingclinic.com. This project is funded by the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
that's been taking place throughout the Titans offseason program that could honestly decide games, right? One of the most important positions on the football team that I feel like we haven't quite talked about a lot. And we just did a little bit with Coach Mack, but I think Coach Mack's answer, Rhett, Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you, 104.5 The Zone, highlights the fact that we don't really talk about it a lot because most of us, unless you're in that world, just don't know how to talk about it.
Sure.
So it's just a fascinating thing where it's a critical position that you have to get right. It can decide games. It can decide championships. But we all kind of sit here, and it's hard to give real solid takes and opinions on it because we have no idea. We don't know about that world.
It's what I said earlier, and I'll say again, one of the most important stats in the current National Football League is points per possession. And you got to, if a drive stalls, you got to have a guy, as Coach Mack would say, to put it between those yellow things. So currently in-house, we have two candidates here.
For the kicking battle, of course.
For the kicking battle for the Tennessee Titans. One is 2022 undrafted rookie free agent from, second year as an undrafted rookie last year, from Iowa, Caleb Shudak, 25 years old, signed last spring. Was injured in practice last summer, placed on PUP, a reserve PUP, and then designated to return to practice just before Thanksgiving. Was activated on November 26th and was waived on December the 3rd of 2022 and signed to a futures contract this January. So in that weekend that he was activated, he kicked in the Bengals game. He had field goals of 34, 33, 24, 38, a missed 35-yarder wide right, made an extra point, and had 4 touchbacks and 5 kickoffs against the Bengals. So there's a small body of work that we know about him. The other gentleman that is currently in as a potential kicker winner is undrafted 2023 rookie free agent from Texas Tech, Trey Wolff, 23 years old. And he was a walk-on from Spring High School in Klein, Texas. And I think his career long is 51, as is Caleb Shudak's in college.
He was 2 for 2 on kicks from 50-plus last season with Texas Tech. Wolf.
So there's the two young gentlemen, to your point, that don't have a lot of experience at this level. And so it remains to be seen, do they stay with the two of them? And, of course, they have all offseason. Craig Aukerman, the special teams coordinator, mentioned in one of the first OTAs that these two will battle it out through OTAs, through mandatory minicamp, which we already have in the rearview mirror, and they will be battling it out in training camp upcoming. And so it got me to thinking about this when you posed your question. Would the Titans entertain bringing in another kicker? Well, that goes back to the DeAndre Hopkins question of, if you bring in a veteran, it's going to cost money. Now, is it going to be the end of the world money? No, but you still have to make sure that you've got enough space because, again, you have not signed quarterback Will Levis, the 33rd overall pick out of your draft class, and you still need money to operate for transactions throughout the season. And that's to do, an addition like a DeAndre Hopkins. Well, certainly that would apply if you bring in a kicker. There is a kicker that is out there that is very interesting to me. And when I'm thinking about this, keeping in mind that both of those gentlemen's college long range in Caleb Shudak and Trey Wolff is 51 yards. This guy has a bomber of a leg. This guy's hit a 63-yarder. Brett Maher, a former Cowboys kicker. He's 33 years old. And looking at his career stats, now he had a bad game in that game against the Vikings, I believe it was. He had one game where he missed some chip shots or PAT, maybe it was PATs. But he played all last season for the Cowboys. He was 9 of 9 at 20 to 29 yards, 5 of 5 and 30 to 39, 6 of 7 and 40 to 49. Which you heard in, I can't remember, one of those OTA availabilities, special teams coordinator for the Titans, Craig Aukerman, said that's kind of the money range. 50 to 59, he's 8 of 10, and then he hit 1 out of 60-plus. In fact, he has 2 in his career, 60-plus. I just think that is a guy that I would think about because, listen, we're at an age and a place going back to the stat of points per possession where you're starting to see specialists get drafted a little earlier because they want a guy who can bomb it. You don't always get lucky in terms of just like the Titans did with a punter in Ryan Stonehouse who could absolutely bomb it. So that's a guy that I'd be interested in a veteran prospect who has long-range experience. And he's a vet, so, he'd cost you some money. But I think I'd look at that.
Brett Maher in 2022 with Dallas was 29 of 32, so a percentage of over 90%. Perfect between 20 and 29. Perfect between 30 and 39. 6 for 7 between 40 and 49. 9 for 11, 50-plus, long of 60.
Mm-hmm.
That is a name that I have not heard brought up when it comes to the Titans kicking battle. Craig Ackerman's talked about how Wolf and Shudak are kind of neck and neck in this thing, but when you consider last year, too, the margins of the Titans season last year, right? I mean, you're talking about a win and in situation at the end of the regular season. You're talking about being one game better and you are hosting a playoff game, your division champs. Can you tell me, just off the top of your head, how many games the Titans lost by 3 points or less in 2022?
Not off the top
If you
of my
just
head.
had to guess, what would you say?
I don't know, 5?
3. They
Okay.
lost 3.
Okay.
The Giants game, the Chiefs game, and the Chargers game. They didn't lose all of those because of the kicking game. I mean, Randy Bullock missed a 50-plus yarder against L.A., and he did not, he was not the reason the Titans lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in overtime.
Right.
But those are just the margins, right? And a 2 to 3 game difference is a massive difference in
Well,
a
you're talking
division
about
race.
them winning the AFC South division for the third straight year is what you're talking about.
Yeah, so this is a critical development, right?
Sure.
For the Titans 2023. And Brett Maher is as interesting a name as I've heard brought up because he's coming off a nice year with the Dallas Cowboys.
And dude can kick it, man. I mean, he's hit a 63-yarder. I mean, how many, and we're in a day and age. Look, Justin Tucker, there's only one of him, and he's in Baltimore and going to be probably for his whole career the most accurate kicker in the league's history. And I forget what his percentage is, but he's ridiculous. And he's hit a 66-yarder, right? He's the record holder for that. But if you're going to get a guy with some range and a guy who's a vet who can come in and help you, I think that's a name you got to look at.
Now, Jackson Williams, our producer, just said it in my ear. You mentioned it too, Rhett. The kind of collapse he had in the playoff game against Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
In the first round of the playoffs, in the wild card round, I should say, Cowboys won 31-14. Should have been more than that. Mar went 1 for 5. He missed his first 4 extra points, something crazy like that in that game.
Yes, that's what it was.
1
That's
for
right.
5.
Thank you for that, Jackson.
On PATs. And then in the San Francisco game, the divisional round, when the Cowboys lost 19-12, he was 2 for 2 on his field goals, long of 43, but he missed his only extra point attempt.
And I think it was the first one, yeah.
And then he's cut. He's cut by the Dallas Cowboys. So in Mar's most recent postseason, he went 1 for 6 on PATs.
Yep.
Now, that's not a big picture statistic on Mar's career. He's had a fantastic career, and kickers older than 33 have had success in this league. So that is a fascinating idea brought up by you, Rhett, that maybe the Titans would explore going into training camp.
Well, and I'm looking at Spot Track right here at current free agents. Ryan Suckup, to your point, speaking to Tampa and former Titan.
Let's get into some of those.
Yeah, that's right, because we got to get to a break.
Jason in the Borough wants to talk about this as well. Who else could the Titans bring in at the kicking position? And some more on DeAndre Hopkins. Diana Rossini of ESPN had the latest right here on The Zone earlier this week. When we come back, Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you until 1 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone. It is 12:02. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica. College World Series, the National Championship Series is set, and it's an all-SEC matchup. LSU walked it off in the 11th inning on Thursday, beating Wake Forest 1-0. They will face Florida in a 3-game series in Omaha, with Game 1 starting tomorrow at 6 p.m. NBA draft was last night. 2 local prospects hearing their name called. Former Cane Ridge and Alabama star Brandon Miller taken 2nd overall to the Charlotte Hornets, and former Belmont Bruins star Ben Shepherd taken 26 overall by the Indiana Pacers. Saturday night, Nashville Soccer Club stays on the road, heading to Columbus for an Eastern Conference matchup. The Boys in Gold defeated Columbus at home 3-1 on Memorial Day weekend. Nashville still 2nd in the East. Columbus sits in 6th. Kickoff is at 6:30. You can hear the call right here on The Zone, pregame starting at 6. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone. We did it. We got Buck fired. Not here today. Good job by everyone involved. Rhett, Bryan, Jackson Williams, Robert Walsh, who's floating around the building. There you go. That will be Buck's remaining contribution to the show today. No, he'll be back on Monday if he is in one piece from his trip to Las Vegas, a bachelor party that he didn't quite want to go to. But either way, you'll hear from him at 10 a.m. on Monday. Rhett, Bryan, and I have you covered until 1 o'clock, and then Blaine and Mickey will pick things up from there, live from Twin Creeks Marina. Beautiful day to go hang out with the guys out in Winchester. But home stretch here, Rhett, as we left off in the last segment talking about the kicking battle with the Tennessee Titans, and you brought up Brett Maher, the former Cowboys kicker, who had a nice 2022. Obviously, the meltdown came missing 4 extra points in the wild card round, the playoffs, the win over the Tampa Bay Bucks, missed another extra point in the divisional round against the Niners. Really an outlier in what's been a really nice career for Brett Maher. Otherwise, big leg, 33 years old, as you mentioned, currently a free agent. Could the Titans explore something like that to bring in during this kicking competition between second-year pro Caleb Shudak, who last year was 3 for 4, a long of 38, was 1 for 1 in his lone extra point, and rookie Trey Wolff, an undrafted rookie out of Texas Tech. You had some more names, including one former Titan.
Yeah, I'm looking at available kicker free agents, and obviously Randy Bullock is still floating out there. Mason Crosby, the former Green Bay Packer, 38 years old, very proven kicker. Ryan Suckup, who's spent time with Tampa, won a world championship with them, and obviously with the Titans, Kansas City. Robbie Gould. Again, you're talking about Mason Crosby's 38, Suckup's 36, Robbie Gould's 40 years old. Zane Gonzalez from the Arizona Cardinals, 28 years old. Quinn Nordin, who was with New England, he's just 24. Alex Cavedo with New Orleans, 24. Julian Diaz, undrafted free agent. Parker White, another Green Bay guy, 24. Elliott Fry, 28-year-old kicker from the Arizona Cardinals. And then I see Jake Verity, also who's with Tampa Bay. He's an unrestricted. He's 25. So looks like there's some younger, not as quite proven guys, and then there's some, older seasoned veterans there.
Would you be surprised if they did not bring somebody in for training camp?
I mean, I think that largely depends on what the two in the battle do, right? Because if they're not, accurate and they don't feel good about it, they're going to make a move. But if it turns out well, I mean, yeah. So I can answer that either way. I can answer it with, no, I wouldn't be surprised because both of them did really well and one of them ends up winning out the job. And then I could say I would not be surprised because if they didn't do well at all, both are largely unproven.
Yeah.
I mean, one for sure in Trey Wolff, who hadn't, taken an NFL snap yet. And Caleb Shudak has limited reps in a game, one game sample. So
It is amazing, and you would know this as well as anybody. Looking at, obviously, when it comes to punters, there's about 3 names that have punted for the Titans since they came to Nashville.
Yeah.
And it was a similar conversation with your kicker, right? With Al Del Greco, and then all those years with Rob Baronis and what Ryan Suckup did here. Like, you didn't have, it wasn't a very long list of Titans kickers, right, from the late 90s to about 2018, 19. I'm trying to remember exactly when Ryan Suckup moved on.
Yeah, it's one of the 2 or 3 legacy positions that the Titans have been afforded as a franchise.
Right. But
to your point, you will go from Craig Hentrick to Brett Kern to Ryan Stonehouse.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. You go from Brad Hopkins to Michael Roos to Taylor Lewan to now Andre Dillard. I mean, that's a short list. Kicker, same thing. Running back, has had some greats, as we have seen in Titans history, between Eddie George and going to CJ2K and now to Derrick Henry. So, yeah, it's one of those things that you don't think about, but you certainly bring this to the light and the surface with, kicker being unanswered. And they've, had Randy Bullock for a couple of years. And, but yeah, it's one that may have to be addressed. They're going to let these guys battle it out, but I'm sure their radar is up for other things.
Sure. And
you have to be ready for something like that.
I'm sure they're ready to get back to the point where it's just the one guy for all those years. Because now the list, Rhett, since, we'll say 2019, I mean, you're talking about Michael Badgley, Cairo Santos, Cody Parkey coming in, Randy Bullock, like you mentioned. Who's Greg Joseph now with the Minnesota Vikings, who was there during the AFC Championship run. Janikowski. The list is so much longer of players that have Josh Lambo, that have kicked for the Titans in the last 4 or 5 years than the entirety of the franchise for about 20 years. So it's I wonder if there's a restless feeling in that building to get this figured out and be able to move past it.
I don't know that I would describe it a restless feeling, but it certainly is probably on a short list of things that, they feel like they have to improve on. One being, offensive drives that stall out, fourth quarter scoring, some of the things we've highlighted throughout the show today. But I would think it'd be on a short list for sure.
615-737-1045. Jason in the Borough checks in on 1045 The Zone. What's up, Jason?
Hey, guys. I'm not sure about kickers-wise, but I guess it was last year or year before, we actually had our punter doing kicks. So my question to you is, through high school to college NFL, you have players that transition to switch to a different position. I guess I'll give you an example. Let's say Derrick Henry is no longer do the running back position, and he's just Tajay Spears is just killing it. Why can't they just move and keep Derrick Henry as a fullback and run him as a fullback? But what I want to say is, in the NFL, what player in the NFL has successfully done 2 positions in the NFL?
Thanks, Jason.
That's my question.
You'd have to go back quite a while to find that, when players used to play both ways or were counted upon because they, athletic prowess was really, really off the charts.
Like the modern day would be Debo Samuel, right? Who can line up in the backfield, line up outside in the slot.
Yep. Yeah, that would be an example. Because usually, when Derrick Henry is done, whether it's his time with the Titans done, he will find a job somewhere else.
Yeah.
But when he is done as a running back, he'll be done, period.
Right.
I don't see any transition there for him to another spot. And look, we've seen examples of college quarterbacks moving to wide receiver and things like that, and it didn't work out as well. The name escapes me right now, but the guy who was a quarterback at Ohio State who moved to wide receiver.
Braxton Miller, right?
He's one, and then there was one before him. Oh, my gosh.
It's going to kill me, too. Not Troy Smith, who won the Heisman.
No.
Yeah,
Troy Smith.
We'll track it down because I know he played wide receiver in the league.
Yeah.
He was Ohio State's starting quarterback from Terrell Pryor. Thank you, Jackson.
Terrell Pryor.
Thank you.
That's who I'm thinking of. But yeah, very rarely do you have, somebody changing positions. Yeah, it's not uncommon for somebody to change positions in college. For example, there's an undrafted rookie free agent right now that the Titans have, TK. Good Lord, I forget his last name, but he's a defensive lineman. He went from LSU to Eastern Kentucky, and he changed position. He was a tight end. He was like a 3 or 4 star tight end prospect, and was a reserve tight end at LSU, and then transferred and moved to defense. And he's he's an undrafted this year, trying to find a way onto the roster.
Ryan Tannehill, former wide receiver. What name did you say, Jackson?
Cordell Stewart, the Pittsburgh quarterback, played a lot of receiver.
In some packages, he did. Yes. Yeah, there's a few, but there's not like large sample sizes of that stuff. Really, back in the NFL's golden age, in the 50s and 60s is where you would find some more things like that. But yeah, I mean, guys are so sculpted towards a certain position. And because even a really good athlete, if you're playing a totally different position, you better be a good football player. That's what it requires. I mean, you can have all the speed and hops you want, but if you're an athlete playing football, you notice that. But if you're a good football player who has athletic prowess, those are the ones that are usually the good to greats, right?
Right. Well, DeAndre Hopkins is one of those.
He is. He is a difference maker. And the thing about thinking about him, if say it is just down to New England and Tennessee, I don't know why in the world he would take New England. Again, because of the Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi part of it. And I'm not saying disparaging things, but I mean, him or Ryan Tannehill, who can rifle the ball into you with some accuracy in this thing. And then I also layer it with the relationship that Mike Vrabel would have knowing him in Houston and Tim Kelly as well.
We'll get into that a little bit and find out if there's any reason to believe that any other team is involved right now when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins other than the Titans and Patriots. You'll hear from Diana Rossini. Plus, what was the most underrated move of the Titans offseason throughout this most recent cycle? Lucas Panzica, Rhett, Bryan hanging out with you until 1 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone. Is there any reason to believe that a team other than the Tennessee Titans and the New England Patriots is in on the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes?
So what you want? Oh, sorry, I'm just going off the bump music there.
That's Rhett, Bryan.
Beastie Boys, man.
I'm Lucas Panzica with you until 1 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone. Jackson Williams, our producer, appreciate you hanging out with us. Hopkins has visited the Titans. He's visited the Patriots. There's no reason to believe. In fact, there's reported information that he will not sign until at least the start of training camp, maybe even a little bit past that, in case circumstances change. But Diana Rossini of ESPN joined the Buck Reising show earlier this week, I believe on Wednesday, if you want to go check out that podcast, to talk about what she has heard about DeAndre Hopkins. And she actually spent a few days in Kansas City, one of the teams that has been continuously brought up for D-Hop. This was Diana earlier this week.
You know, you heard recently Dalvin Cook joined Adam Schefter on his podcast to talk about how epic a duo they would be together to sign with one team, you know, and obviously, you know, the Tennessee Titans don't need a running back as talented as Dalvin Cook is at his age. But, you know, the thought process here is I think there's a lot of fans that want to see these super teams like, let's say, the New York Jets come in and be able to land those guys. But that is not the sense I get around the league right now, that those two are going to wind up on the same team. Now, Dalvin Cook maybe to the Jets, yeah, I could see that maybe happening. Going to the Miami Dolphins, that as well. But for D-Hop right now, it just seems these are the two teams, the New England Patriots and the Tennessee Titans. So we'll see how this thing shakes out.
New England Patriots and the Tennessee Titans. Diana was in Kansas City last week. It was a different part of the interview where she said she didn't get a feel as though anything close to that was formulating any real interest in DeAndre Hopkins. The Chiefs can't pay for DeAndre Hopkins right now. They'd have to certainly move some things around, which so would the Titans, and so would the Patriots. But as of right now, Rhett, do you buy any noise around the Kansas City Chiefs being a team that could end up with DeAndre Hopkins, or does that just feel like a conversation being had because they were somewhat brought up in a potential trade for him months ago, and maybe that's just something people would love to see?
I think anything's possible, first of all, because you mentioned it. I mean, the teams that are mentioned can move money around and move players around to do what they need to do. And it would not be a huge surprise if he were to sign with Kansas City, because it's just one of those things where it seems like the rich get richer, right? But do they really need him? I mean, they've got weapons. And look, as long as they got Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be contending annually. I mean, they just are. I'll say this. The Patriots and the Titans are the two that have been mentioned and have mentioned that they have offered him a contract. Whether that's real or not, I don't pretend to know, but I do know this. There's always somebody lurking. There's always somebody in the weeds that goes, I'd like to have, you know. Now, we don't know from DeAndre Hopkins' camp what his feel is. Is he going for the money? Is he going for the ring? Is he, you know, what is the tipping point for him?
And
that obviously makes a difference in all of this.
We haven't heard him say. We haven't heard him answer that question, but all the reports around that have been the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but with all of that in mind, part of me thinks the Titans would be a favorable spot just because of all the things I've mentioned. The prior relationship that he knows Tim Kelly and Mike Vrabel from their time together in Houston. And obviously that must have been a pleasant experience because he wouldn't have come in here and visited and stayed here as long as he reportedly did if that was so. Because, I mean, there was some dark spots, you know, in Houston Texans history, in recent history with all the well, good Lord, Deshaun Watson stuff and everything else. And obviously he got traded. Bill O'Brien traded him to the Arizona Cardinals. But I would think there's some solid history there that would create at least a thread for communication, dialogue, etc.
If he was willing to take that visit to New England, I have a hard time thinking the Bill O'Brien thing would be a big deal breaker. And I'm with you. I mean, that looked like a toxic way to leave Houston. Everything that happened between DeAndre and Bill O'Brien. I mean, they traded him for David Johnson, the running back.
who David Johnson of 2 or 3 years before, that would have been all right. But this is David Johnson who was coming off some pretty significant injuries.
One of the worst moves in recent memory in the NFL. I mean, I have a hard time thinking of a worse just.
Bill O'Brien was the greatest general manager in Texans history. They just needed to keep churning out the hits.
For the Tennessee Titans, yes, he was. He absolutely was.
Please. But the thing is, at the end of the day, that's Bill Belichick's outfit. I don't care what you say.
Right.
Yes, Bill O'Brien is heavily involved in the offensive part of that. And if there's an unpleasant history, yes, there's some things maybe they'd have to work through. I don't know if DeAndre Hopkins is a guy that carries grudges or not. Well, all of that remains to be seen. But yeah, that's another reason why I would think that maybe it would tip towards the Titans or possibly another team. I'm not saying that he's coming to the Titans. I think it'd be great if he did. And this time of the year, every year, Titans fans go bananas about, oh God, we need him. And listen, I would like to have DeAndre Hopkins. I think that's fantastic. But whatever was reported with his practice habits towards the end of the season with the Arizona Cardinals, that would have to change. And I hope that he's healthy, and I hope that, because the rest of it, I have no questions about. His skill set, I have no questions about that whatsoever. Because when he's out there, he's going to make a catch for you.
And we talked about it yesterday. We played audio from Greg Cosell on why his game can continue to be effective later into his career more than a Julio Jones. That so much of it is predicated on stop and start and velocity, right? Where DeAndre Hopkins, you're talking about 50-50 balls, route running, not so much the speed element of his game, which has never been the biggest thing about DeAndre Hopkins.
No, but those two things you mentioned, route running and catch radius and possession, those are things he excels at and always has. I mean, Lord knows, in his early career with the Houston Texans, he has been a nightmare for the Titans.
615-737-1045, the zone for you to join the discussion. You can also check in on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, 1045 The Zone TV, where Amar in the FNM Bank chat says, I hope he comes to the Titans, but the longer this goes, the more I think he's going to Kansas City or New England. I would slightly disagree with that because I don't think the longer it goes, the more I think he goes to X place. I don't think that has anything to do with this. I don't think the longer this drags out, this means DeAndre Hopkins is more likely to end up in New England. For me, it's just dragging out because he's waiting to see. He's in information gathering mode. He's going to gather as much information as he can, whatever information might pop up between now and training camp.
And so with that in mind, if you're drawing a line to something, I feel like you can draw a line to, if he goes to Kansas City, it's about getting a world championship ring. If he comes to the Titans, it's about money with a chance to compete.
Right. And
is that fair?
It's totally fair. And everything that we have heard about DeAndre Hopkins is that this is a highest bidder situation, which is why I am still, for the time being, not 100% ruling out the Chiefs. Anything can happen, obviously, but I'm just not buying that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be a part of this. Because not only can they not pay him right now, they don't have to. They don't have to.
No, they're still loaded.
This is the team that told Tyreek Hill, we don't need you. We'll win one anyway. And I know Tyreek Hill's contract situation was a much bigger task to take on than DeAndre Hopkins on a potential 1-2 year deal, whatever it might be. But it's just the principle of it. The Kansas City Chiefs can tell DeAndre Hopkins, come here, 3 years. We'll laden it with incentives. We're going to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, so you're going to get a ring out of this.
Right. So if you want to come along for the ride, great. If not, we don't need to pay you $10 million. Yep. If DeAndre Hopkins is playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, he is either A, completely course-corrected towards, okay, you know what, it's not about the money, it's about the ring, or it's because the Titans or the Patriots or whoever else just were not willing to go above a certain mark. And to me, I don't know what that mark would be, but it's clear DeAndre Hopkins probably, and I think rightfully, believes that he should get Odell Beckham money because of what Odell Beckham got. 1 year, $15 million, 18 with incentives. I don't know that's what he's going to get, but I think it's fair for him to expect that when you look at a guy in Odell Beckham, similar age range, that hadn't played football in a year and a half.
Yeah. So I'd like to shift, if we can, in this segment to what you had teased before the break about the most underrated move of the Titans offseason, most underrated move of the NFL season. And the reason I say this, in the F&M Bank chat, Bradford S. says the most underrated move of the Titans offseason was the switch to an artificial playing surface at Nissan Stadium. And that's one I hadn't thought of after you posed the question. I think that's an excellent choice, simply because Ryan Tannehill has talked about it's not his favorite thing to do and the recovery time afterwards, but it's also something that is probably necessary. They've tried to grow grass in the back half of the season at the stadium for years, and it eventually has to be resodded. And listen, Terry Porch and his crew do a great job, but they're kind of behind the eight ball in this and have been with the way it was constructed and how much sand was in there and those kinds of things in terms of drainage, because it's so close to a major body of water, being the Cumberland River. I think that's a good one. I had a couple for the Titans, and this goes back to our conversation with Coach Dave McGinnis, and go find the podcast of that stuff as we're done, like you do all your Good Zone podcasts. But we talked about Arden Key. I think he is an underrated, quietly not as talked about part of the offseason in this, and it's going to be important for him to come in and contribute and prove, as Coach Mack would say, that he's a dude, because we've got Harold Landry coming off an ACL. He hadn't even been a year out on that, right? That's one for the Titans. In a league part of it, I think it remains to be seen, but I think it may be underrated that Orlando Brown Jr., Zeus Jr., went to Cincinnati to help protect Joe Burrow. And another one in a coaching respect, the Miami Dolphins on paper are loaded to the gills. They got Vic Fangio to run their defense. I think that's something they may have been missing, because they've got some defensive talent on that side of the ball, because it seems like Tua Tagovailoa and those other guys have kind of figured it out on the offensive side of this. I think a Vic Fangio-led Dolphins defense is maybe a difference maker for them. That's my choices.
No, I'm with you on Vic Fangio. That's what I had at the top of my list on the most underrated move of the NFL offseason, not Titan specific.
Sorry I took yours.
No. I agree with you. Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins in 2022, 24th in points per game defensively, 18th in the league in yards per game, number 4 in rush defense, but bottom 5 in pass defense. Last time Vic Fangio, when he was the head coach of the Denver Broncos in 2021, that defense finished top 10 in yards per game, top 15 in rush defense, top 10 in pass defense, top 3 in points per game. And the last time Vic Fangio was a defensive coordinator, Chicago had one of the best defenses in the league in 2018. And in the years before that, with Matt Nagy as the head coach. I couldn't agree more. And all this talk about DeAndre Hopkins visiting with the Patriots, Vic Fangio going to Miami, and we've been talking in this hypothetical world of what if DeAndre went to the Titans? Well, what if DeAndre went to New England? Would that make the AFC East the most intriguing division in the conference? With the Bills, Patriots, Dolphins, and Jets with Aaron Rodgers?
It might. And the only reason I would say that I wouldn't say just because DeAndre goes to New England, simply because I go back to the signal callers there and Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. I wonder about that in terms of what they're going to get. And maybe they'll both come out and just throw, they'll have a quarterback battle and whoever wins it, and they'll be great, whatever. But the dynasty's done there. It's over. The Titans ended that. And certainly as long as Bill Belichick is, wearing a shredded up hoodie on the sidelines, they have a chance to do something. But with the other part of it, to me, about the NFC East, the loaded to the gills Dolphins that we're talking about, the Aaron Rodgers move to the New York Jets, and then some of his receivers and things coming over, and then the Buffalo Bills have loaded the wagons the last 2-3 years to try to win a world championship. And by the way, for those who don't think the salary cap's real, wait till you see what happens to the Buffalo Bills if they don't go to and win a Super Bowl right now in 2023, because they've paid everybody they can pay, and the receipts come due.
So back to your point about Arden Key. We'll focus back on the Titans here. He joined this show a few weeks ago, maybe closer to a month ago, and Key throughout his career was Was a starter year one. His rookie year in Oakland, he started 10 of 17 games. Since then, he has not started more than 3 games in a season, and that was last year in Jacksonville. So here's his opportunity with Harold Landry coming back off of his ACL and Arden Key as basically being 1B, right, as your pass rusher. He joined the show a few weeks ago and was asked about that opportunity on being more than a third down rusher with the Tennessee Titans.
Oh, it made it a whole lot easier. Just because I wanted to be more than just a third down guy. Dating back to San Fran, I was in San Fran. I was just a third down guy there, and then transferred to had success there. Then went to Jacksonville, of course, and was again a third down guy. When I got to Jacksonville, I wanted to be more than just a third down guy. And the opportunity presented itself. I mean, of course, throughout the duration of the season, you might have injuries and stuff like that. So that opportunity presented itself, and it was allowed me to put good film out there that I actually can play first and second down. And then Tennessee called with the opportunity, and I jumped on it.
And to his point, he has an opportunity to prove to be more than just to be the third down guy, and he will have ample opportunity to do that because it would not surprise me at all if Harold Landry starts the year on PUP. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. But so that leaves the onus on Rashad Weaver and Arden Key and a 33-year-old Danico Autry. So he's going to get his chance. And I think he'll make the most of it. I think that's the thing I get out of him is he exudes confidence. And as Coach Mack was saying earlier, he's a long guy and a bendy guy. I think if he gets the right stuff around him and in the right place, which certainly for Titans fans, we hope this is the case, I think he can have a chance to be a difference maker. I really do.
Best thing about Arden Key for me in the last 3 years has been his availability, without question. Really, his entire career, with the exception of 2019, his second year in Oakland, where he only played in 7 games, he's played in a minimum of 14 games in every other year of his NFL career that now is going into year 6. 16, the 7 in year 2, 14, 17, and 17. Didn't miss a game each of the last 2 years in San Francisco and then Jacksonville in 2022. When you consider how much better this pass rush was with Bud Dupree and Harold Landry on the field together, the numbers play that out. They just weren't nearly enough. Obviously, at no point they were last year with Landry out due to the ACL. The year before, it was more of Bud Dupree in and out of the lineup.
And Bud returning from the same injury.
Right.
In ACL that he didn't get worked on until January.
Yeah, that he was coming off of when he came to the Titans.
Right. And so if I'm not mistaken, Harold Landry tore his on a Wednesday practice August 31st of 2022. So we're coming up on a year, but it's just been a shade of, not quite 10 months yet.
I believe it was right there that Labor Day weekend where it's week 1 of college football. It's
right before the regular season.
Right. The NFL is in that break before week 1. That one weekend break between preseason and regular season is when Harold Landry went down.
We didn't find out about it until like the next day or the following day. I think we found out it may be late September 1st.
Right. So you, A, need an Arden Key ready for that opportunity, which he seems to be, a full-time starter, not just a third down pass rusher. And then B, Harold Landry coming back off the ACL with about a year of recovery. Always going to be a question mark, right? But players recover differently. We saw how Jeffrey Simmons did.
And look at how many snaps that Harold had before this.
Yeah.
If he can return to some form with some numbers similar, then they're going to be okay. But you're right, because he's has the lean and the bend. And then I also point to Rashad Weaver in this when we're talking pass rush. He's going into year 3, and he started off like gangbusters. I think he had 4 quarterback sacks in the first 5 games, something like that. He was on a streak where he had 1 every week. And then it tapered off a little bit, but I'm sure he's working on things like that.
There are moments in everyone's life that can be considered a milestone, whether career, just general life moments, achievements that you can really hang your hat on and look back on. Rhett Bryan had one of those moments recently. I want to talk about that coming up next. We'll finish out the show, do the polls, and wrap it up on 104.5 The Zone. Wrapping it up on a Friday. Blaine and Mickey will keep it going at 1 o'clock. And I'm jealous of Blaine and Mickey today because they are out at Twin Creeks Marina in Winchester. And a beautiful day to be doing that. So go hang out with them until 3 o'clock on 104.5 The Zone. Lucas Panzica, Rhett Bryan with you. Tease this on the way out, Rhett. You accomplished something that anybody else would dream to have accomplished at any point in their life or career. I saw this about a week ago with you and Coach Mac's visit to Two Rivers Ford. You got yourself a bobblehead. A Rhett Bryan bobblehead, positioned right there next to the Coach Mac bobblehead that we've all seen and love. What did you think of the likeness?
I thought it was pretty close.
It was pretty well done, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, my beard's a little longer, and I have a beard instead of just a Van Dyke with a mustache and a goatee.
Right.
But, yeah, the likeness is certainly there. Randy Wilmore and our friends at Farm Bureau Health Plans had those made for us, just like he did the Coach Mac ones. And, that I haven't shown those off very often, and I had people hit me with messages, hey, where do I get one? I want one, that kind of stuff. But, it's pretty wild to think that I have one. It's just different. I mean, the first shipment, had family members, if I don't get one of those, I hate you forever, and,
Wait, how many did you get? Did you get like a bulk?
I got a few. I didn't get a ton. It's a limited supply.
Limited edition Rhett Bryan bobblehead.
Supply's limited. Call now. But, yeah, it was – I got to tell you, it was different, but it was cool at the same time. It really was. It really took off when Two Rivers Ford posted the tweet, and then I quote tweeted it and talked about what a great visit it was. And then Jim Wyatt saw it, and he said, oh, my gosh, Rhett B. Tennessee has a bobblehead. But it's pretty wild. It is pretty wild to do that, and it's something I am proud of because it's not everybody can say they have one of their, a likeness of them in a bobblehead. It's kind of cool.
At Rhett B. Tennessee, if you want to look at it from he and Coach Mac's visit to Two Rivers Ford last week. Right there next to each other. You got Coach Mac decked out in black, and then Rhett Bryan in his quarter zip Titans radio polo.
And that's the Coach Mac one. That's the one that is on super high demand.
Iconic.
That's the one that brings hundreds and hundreds of dollars on eBay somewhere, probably.
Speaking of Two Rivers Ford, let's do some polls. That's my personal favorite one.
Really?
Oh, 100%.
Interesting.
What's yours favorite? What's your favorite of all the poll opens that you've made over the years?
I really enjoyed doing the one Star Wars.
Star Wars is well done.
Ben, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Chewbacca, and that was a lot of fun. And Beavis and Butthead.
It's a classic.
Beavis and Butthead.
It's a good one.
Baby.
For me, no better poll open to send you into your weekend than the Austin Powers one. The music and everything.
It makes you randy, baby.
Amazing. Which current, presented by Two Rivers Ford, by the way, who sells below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford. Which current Titans player would benefit the most if they were to acquire DeAndre Hopkins? Majority, 42%, going Ryan Tannehill, quarterback.
And that makes sense. I mean, he's the guy. He's the field general. Who's next?
41% say it is Traylon Burks. 14% say it'd be Derrick Henry. Only 3% say Chigakonkwo, which was your submission.
Yeah. Interesting.
What was the most underrated move of the Titans offseason? George says Keith Carter out, Jason Hotailing in as offensive line coach. He says it seems like it was time for a change, and I feel like fans are not talking about it as much as they should.
And the onus is on him to get this thing back on track, and 3 new moving parts to this, and 4/5 of them changing positions. You have 3 that are new in, and then Aaron Brewer likely being at center.
Nicholas says it's Arden Key. He agrees with you. I never gave mine. I think it's Charles London coming in from the Falcons staff.
I like that.
Passing game coordinator, quarterbacks coach. I mean, when you look down the road at the future of this franchise, is Charles London not one of the most important people in that building? with what Will Levis and Malik Willis are trying to achieve?
I say I like that, and I'll give you another one is Justin Outen that they brought in as the run game coordinator and working in that part of it. And he's got another title. I forget what it is. Those two were significant hires to this coaching staff, both he and London.
Which college sport is it most difficult to win a national championship in? 44% say football, 33% going with basketball, 21% say baseball, just 2% say softball.
Well, that kind of falls in line with what we discussed.
George Woodard replies saying basketball because excellent teams lose in the first weekend of March all the time. 7 of the 16 top-seeded teams this year failed to make the Sweet 16. So many teams to beat, no home court advantage at any point.
Well done. Brought the stats.
Should Les Miles be in the College Football Hall of Fame? 66% say no. No to the Mad Hatter.
And you see what I mean? If you'd done the same poll question with Mike Leach, you'd have different results.
Yes, absolutely.
And by a landslide, probably.
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Likeability and amenable, I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, Miles had off-field stuff that Leach did not. I also think Leach's contribution to the game with the air raid offense probably more of an impact than Les Miles. Both are below that 60% threshold that you need to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. Get Mike Leach in there. Let's get the Pirate. Let's get the Pirate in
there,
the hall.
man.
Put him in Atlanta. What are we doing? Rhett, appreciate you hanging out.
This was fun, and I'm ready to kick off the weekend.
Always flies by. Jackson Williams, our producer. Blaine and Mickey got you coming up next from 1 to 3 live at Twin Creeks Marina out in Winchester. Go see him. It's a beautiful day. For Rhett Bryan, I'm Lucas Panzica. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday on 104.5 The Zone.